Firearm owners are commonly thought of and treated as a homogeneous group, with little evidence to support that this is the case. This study wanted to determine if there were specific subgroups of firearm owners that exist within the United States and figure out who they want to hear from when it comes to firearm safety for suicide prevention. We used 2 samples. The first was a nationally representative sample, and the second was a sample from New Jersey, Minnesota, and Mississippi. In the national sample, we found 4 unique groups of firearm owners. The first group owned 2 to 4 firearms, owned all types of firearms, were more likely to use 2 or more locking devices, and had lower rates of lifetime thoughts of suicide. The second group owned 1 shotgun or rifle, were less likely to be from a racial or ethnic minority group, and were more likely to store their firearms unloaded. The third owned 5 or more firearms, owned all types of firearms, and were more likely to experience lifetime thoughts of suicide and had high rates of threat sensitivity. The fourth group owned 1 handgun. They were more likely to identify as Black and reported owning a firearm for protection at high rates. In the sample from New Jersey, Minnesota, and Mississippi, we found 3 groups of firearm owners, 2 of which were the same from the national sample. One of the ones that was the same from the national sample was a group that owned 5 or more firearms, owned all types of firearms, and were less likely to be from a racial or ethnic minority group. The second was those who owned 1 handgun and were more likely to identify as Black. Additionally, we found a group that owned a mixture of number and types of firearms and had high rates of lifetime suicidal ideation. Then we looked at who they wanted to hear from when it comes to firearm safety for suicide prevention. Although all the groups differed in important ways, like what types of firearm they owned and how they stored it, there was some consistency in who they ranked credible. Family members, law enforcement, suicide prevention groups, past or current military personnel were almost universally seen as credible, whereas celebrities, firearm retailers, the NRA, and NSSF were generally ranked less credible. It's important to recognize and respect that there are unique groups of firearm owners in the U.S. They own different firearms, store them differently, and own for different reasons. We should leverage the voices of those who firearm owners want to hear from to discuss firearm safety for suicide prevention in order to make safe firearm storage messaging more effective.